So I see the financial crisis as kind of a test run for environmental crises, which are much longer run and possibly much more serious. And as an economist who's studied macroeconomics over a long period of time, we have financial crises on a regular basis. We've had much worse ones than this one, and we'll have more in the future. We don't know when or where or how, but they'll come back again. So I see this more as this is a problem that's faced the globe. It's come on very suddenly. What can we learn from observing how we've responded to this for how we might respond to some of the global environmental crises like shortage of water and climate change? And on the positive side, there are some good things that have come out. There has been a lot of cooperation among nations, trying to coordinate responses and doing things that are mutually supportive and avoid some of the stuff that happened in the Great Depression. There has not been a global breakdown. There's been a lot of pain in particular countries. There's been a lot of social unrest. But basically, the systems have kept going to a certain extent. Even though Iceland went bankrupt, people there are still working and doing the things that they've always done. It's also led to a lot of serious thought and action about why this happened and how we might reduce it happening in the future, and that's all been good. On the other hand, this isn't a direct parallel. A financial crisis is something that comes about almost by definition very rapidly, whereas the environmental problem is something that builds up more slowly, and the crisis may come early, but it may come late. And also there are some things about the responses that are a little unnerving as well. There has been some movement towards national self-interest. For example, there's been a rise in protectionism, particularly in food markets around the world, which is not necessarily something we'd like people to respond to environmental crises with. And particularly we think about what happened in the food crisis last year. Some countries responded by banning exports, and that caused a lot more starvation than was actually was necessary. I hate to say necessary, that starvation was necessary, but I don't quite mean it like that. But it could have been avoided. Also, there has been a tendency to fairly radical sort of headline-grabbing responses, huge bailouts with enormous amounts of money that may not really be appropriate responses. I know within the economics community there's been enormous scepticism about some of these bailouts, about whether they were necessary and whether they were equitable and so on, and economists aren't known for concern about some of those things sometimes. But that has been a problem. And there has been suspension of rationality in some cases. Some of the old sort of politically attractive things have leapt back onto the front pages, and people have grabbed onto things that intuitively sound as though they've got to be a good idea, and they forget all the reasons why they weren't a good idea and why we haven't been doing them for quite a long time. And so that's something else that's likely to recur whenever we hit crisis. But I think the things we can learn from this, or that kind of we've already known but always have to keep remembering, is that we need to think really hard all the time now and talk and so on, so that when these crisis moments come and political actors are willing to move, we know where to send them. We've had the public discussions, we've done the technical work, and when they say, whoa, what are we going to do, what should we do now, we've got, well, actually, we've done this really good thinking, and this is where we think we should go, and this is how you should do it, and try and get them to do the practical things in that time. And I think that's something people, what Morgan was quoting from the World Economic Forum, and some of what Al is saying is absolutely right on something various among us have been saying for a long time. We need to integrate natural resources much more deeply into our economy so that the costs are properly incorporated. But that is not easy, and it's not something you can just sort of say it and therefore a couple of years later there'll be a big budget brought out by John Key or whoever, and the problems will all be solved. This is going to be something we need to learn how to do over a long period of time, so we need to all work together on that. Rotorua is one example. Water allocation is a looming example for New Zealand as well. So thank you.
Thank you.